Are we alive?
We are live.
The Android app's a bit different.
It
Excellent.
is. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Facebook Live. We are Naked Security by Sophos. And yeah, we are trying out our Facebook Live on an Android today.
Wow.
Yeah.
If you notice any quality difference, I think you may be blinded by prejudice. But let's hope we've got it right. The lens is a bit different on this. I can kind of see myself in the lens compared to an iPhone. So I'll have to get used to that.
Yes, we will do our
So
comparison
if I look
later.
alarmed at sometimes, it's not because Charlotte's shouting at me, it's because I can see myself. And I've scared myself.
So today's topic is URL spoofing.
It is.
It sounds a bit technical, Doug. What is it, and why are we talking about it right now?
Well, let's start at the end. Why are we talking about it now? The reason is there was a big story all over the media last week about a URL spoofing bug that apparently was found some time ago in Apple Safari, so it affects Mac users and iPhone users. Also affected Microsoft users in Edge. Microsoft patched their browser. Apple didn't. The bug got disclosed and the media got all excited. And the deal with URL spoofing and why it's important, basically what it means is the URL you see in the address bar in your browser doesn't match the website that appears in the main window. So in other words, it's easy to get confused between where you think you are and where you actually are because the URL in the address bar has been spoofed, to put it simply.
Quickly, hi Teresa.
Hello, Teresa.
It's good to have you back.
Yep.
So, Doug, I'm guessing that because Apple just did a round of updates, which included releasing iOS 12, that this bug might have got fixed today?
Oh, so am I that transparent? Why pick it today? Yes, last night, at least UK time, this morning I woke up and there was the fix. iOS 12 has been released and there's a Safari 12 update for macOS, for Mac users. And indeed, even though it's a week since this disclosure, Apple have now fixed them. Now, Apple, unfortunately, I wish they wouldn't do this. They have this official corporate policy, which is keep totally stum about security updates until they're ready. Now, I get that. The idea is you don't want people guessing and speculating. So when you say, hey, there was this bug in our product, you tell people when it's fixed. Unfortunately, what it meant is that a week ago, everyone's panicking, going, well, I wonder if Apple's ignored this. Does it consider this not to be a bug, or is there a bug fix in the works? We speculated on Naked Security last week that the reason that Apple was probably very close to a fix, unfortunately didn't say so, wish they had. But given that the fix is out today, at least for people in the UK, that means we thought it was worth talking about it. Big story, problematic bug last week, all over the news. If you were worried about it and you get the update, you're sorted. Okay,
so why is URL spoofing a hot issue in cybersecurity? The address bar has an incorrect text in it. It's just one line of text though, so why is it such a big deal?
It sounds a bit of a triviality, doesn't it? There's the address bar's got, like imagine it had a typo, or you get a document with spelling mistakes. It doesn't completely throw you off. It doesn't stop you making a judgment. But let me show you some pictures of why we rely on the address bar. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the deal is that you've got the main content window of your website, which is basically filled up by what comes from outside, untrusted stuff. And then you get the URL, the address bar at the top, which is supposed to be the one true sacrosanct place where you learn where your browser thinks it is. So here's a very, very simple contrived example. You can see there's a web server called ns.example, and in the content there's some content, and I've put in there's a web form, there could be JavaScript, there could be a logo, all sorts of stuff in there, and everything in the window actually is determined by the person who operates the web server. So if that's a foreign site that's pretending to be ns.example, you're relying on the address bar, the bit at the very top, to actually tell you that you're on the wrong site. So you can imagine if you can make the bit at the top look like what it shouldn't be, that's very, very beneficial if you're a crook trying to do phishing. And the theory is that although the main window in your website, in your browser, can have anything in it, including fraudulent logos, fake content, the address bar is not directly under the control of anything remote. The browser looks after it carefully, so it's the one true place that you're supposed to be able to look at to figure out where you are. Now, it turns out that using JavaScript inside a web page, this is the example that the researcher who found this problem used. He used a JavaScript function called location.assign. And what that does is it says, after you've rendered one page, it says, oh, by the way, go somewhere else and fetch that page instead. And so in that example, we're basically redirecting to a site called, other.test. And what you'd expect is what actually happens in every browser you want to try this with. If the site exists, you get something that's very similar to what you had before. I've got different content in there, but the content and the address bar change at the same time. Now, what this researcher found is that he could use a URL that was slightly unusual. Here's an example of what he did. He took the URL and he added what's called a TCP port on the end. Now, normally web servers use port 80 for HTTP and port 443 for HTTPS. So he said, go to a site that exists, but to a TCP port where nobody's listening. So it's like making a phone call to a company that's there, through a phone exchange that's working, but to an extension where nobody's sitting. So nobody answers. So what you'd expect to happen when you tell the browser, hey, switch to this new site, what you'd expect is it'll go away, it'll try to connect to the site, eventually it will time out. That typically takes 1 to 2 minutes. And during that time, what you expect is you'll see the old web page and the old URL. And that's what most browsers did, except Edge, patched a month or so ago, and Safari. And so in Safari, unfortunately, what you would see is something that looked more like this. You'd see the old content, which could be a phishing or a fake site, and you'd see the new URL. And only after the download timed out and you got an error message to display would the URL and the content actually line up. Now, I haven't got a picture of this, but on the mobile Safari browser on an iPhone, it was even worse because to save space, it didn't actually show the :8000. So you didn't even realize you were going to a weird part of the site. So what this researcher said is, this is a way of having content from one place, could be a phishing site, and a URL that suggests that you're actually somewhere else, even though you're not there yet. Oh.
Doug, can I just stop you? We've had a quick question from
yes.
Teresa. Well, first of all, Andy says hello from Mechanicsburg, which is
in Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania,
yes.
So Teresa's
the industrial belt, I think, from the name. That's why I assume that's why it's called Mechanicsburg. Like in England, we have Coalville. Guess what they used to mine there?
Who knows? Who knows? So Teresa says, so this has been caught and fixed in most browsers like Microsoft Edge, Internet Explorer, Firefox and Chrome. And Apple is catching up with fixing this in version 12.
That's basically it. Now, just quickly, let me just then show that even though this was kind of a bug and everyone got very excited about it, there are some things that you could have looked for in Safari and you should look for in every browser anyway. And you can see here that although you've got that, there's that new URL, at least in the non-mobile browser, you can see the :8000. You don't see a padlock because it hasn't actually connected to the site, so there's no TLS, there's no security certificate that it's received that it could possibly display. And of course, if you see a website with a web form on it, you shouldn't be putting data in there unless you think you're on a secure site. So that will be warning number 1. The weird port, if it's visible, warning number 2. And also you see that blue bar, other browsers use different visual cues. That means whatever's happening, something's still loaded. So if you're going to put data into the form while a page is still loading, you're kind of putting it into something that's not complete or you're not quite sure what it is yet. So there were already warnings, even in Safari, that the URL, the page is still loading, the URL, there's a hint that it's what's coming next, what's here now. But as Teresa mentions, Apple have fixed that, which means that if you've done an update, you will now be okay. And you should still look out for those things that I've mentioned with whatever browser you're using. Is there a padlock? Does it appear still to be loading the content of the page and to be hung up waiting for a timeout so you don't know what's there yet? Still look out for those, even if you think the URL and the content actually line up nicely. They're cues that tell you what the browser's up to and what the website, how the website at the other end is behaving. Always very useful to know when you're trying to make a security judgment.
So Teresa says, is it considered a quick and dirty fix to disable JavaScript in the browser?
That would fix this particular URL spoofing because it relies on using JavaScript to make an already rendered page switch out for another one. And some people do switch off JavaScript, or they use a plugin like NoScript that selectively blocks JavaScript. That's a good solution for many people. The problem is that there are quite a lot of sites that don't work very well if you turn JavaScript off, because they rely on JavaScript to make things like menus, pop-ups, rollovers, links, this clicking, that clicking, menus that pop up and so forth. They rely on JavaScript to make that work. So blindly blocking JavaScript gives you a very 1990s style of the web, even though it's 2018. So you might find that if you turn off JavaScript altogether, there are a lot of sites that either don't work at all or they just work really clumsily. That's the problem with using that as a fix, and it's why many people don't bother, and why many people don't bother running a script manager, because there can be an awful lot of setting up to make sure you're blocking, allowing the right scripts on the right site and the wrong scripts on the wrong site. Of course, if you have an antivirus software, not that I'm going to plug Sophos Home, which is, of course, as a free version, if you would like to own it, to use it, although I have just plugged it. If you've got an antivirus program that can block both content that comes down and websites that your computer connects to, Sophos Home can do both of those things. What that means, you've also got a fighting chance that if you've got some JavaScript that takes you off somewhere where it shouldn't be, or it tries to load content from a dodgy site and then pretend it's a good site, you won't reach the dodgy site in the first place, or if you get dodgy content back, it won't get rendered in your browser. So that's an alternative way to blocking JavaScript outright, is to say, what I want to do is I want to block content that my antivirus thinks is suspicious, and I want to prevent any visit or any content coming at all from sites that I know are putting me in harm's way. That's a rather long answer to, yes, controlling JavaScript does deal with this particular bug.
So Andy's asked a question as well.
Yeah.
Also, he says, you know me, Duck, from many AVPD and VB conferences while he was with ICSA
I was
Labs.
just wondering if it was that Andy, so hi Andy.
So he says, don't a lot of anti-malware products detect this type of redirection, usually an online banking protection M-in-M attacks?
Well, yes and no, because there's nothing wrong about jumping from one site to another or loading third-party content into a site. And ironically, at least in the UK, many payment pages, when you go there, they actually temporarily jump you off to a content that comes from your bank, which might ask you a question like, put in your secret banking code, type in the code that appeared on your phone, or does some verification with location. You see your bank's logo for a bit, and then you jump back to the site where you're actually doing the payment. So this thing about shifting using JavaScript from one site to another and back is actually used in mainstream sites. So unfortunately, just saying, well, blindly blocking any sort of attempt to redirect from one site to another, the point is you're supposed to be able to do that. What a browser's not supposed to do is tell you you've already reached your new destination when it's still showing the old content. That was the very simple bug that Safari had. It updated the address bar before it had any content to match it, which meant that things could get out of sync. What other browsers were doing is they were waiting until there'd been an error, and then they would update the address bar and the screen to say there's been an error at the same time, so you're never in any doubt. And that's the change Apple has made to fix this.
So I just want to ask a question of my own. What is an M-in-M attack?
I guess man in the middle, or man in the browser. What that means is where you're suddenly on one site where you're putting in secure data. What if you're not actually going to that site? What if there's somebody else that's actually intervening, like a proxy, grabbing your content and looking at it? Now, the good news is, if you're using HTTPS, secure sites, you should get some kind of warning, because the imposter site that you're being redirected to won't be able to come up with the right web certificate compared to, say, your bank or whatever. And you also get what's called a man-in-the-browser attack, which is where you get some kind of JavaScript or a plugin inside the browser that actually, instead of trying to snoop on content while it's in transit, where in the middle it could be encrypted, if you can actually intercept the traffic at the very end, either at the start or the end, obviously it has to be decrypted there. It has to be decrypted at the server so the server knows what you're trying to ask for, and it has to be decrypted inside your browser so that it can actually display it. And that's a man-in-the-browser attack. Same idea. What somebody's doing is somewhere between your screen, the outside surface of your screen, if you like, and the processing on the server, that there's somebody who shouldn't be there is trying to listen in. They can either do it in the middle, man-in-the-middle attack, MITM, which is when they're snooping on the network, or they can do it in the browser where they actually see the stuff after it's been decrypted. So when you see MITM or MITB, that's what those things mean.
Great. So back to URL spoofing.
Yes.
Oh, hang on. We've got one more question.
Excellent. Let's take it.
From Don.
Hello, Don.
He says, how would we get John/Jill public to learn to realise what to look for so as to protect themselves from issues?
Well, we actually write about things, whether directly or indirectly, about things like URL spoofing, email address spoofing, dodgy links in emails, things like that, regularly on Naked Security for exactly that purpose. We feel that this is not it's not a game that we've lost to the cyber crooks. If we just keep reminding people what to look for, then A, people who've never given this a thought will improve in security, and B, because the crooks keep changing their game every time we up ours, they try and alter theirs, it means that people can keep sort of in sync with what the latest attacks are. So we regularly do articles on Naked Security, like the one we did for this particular bug, where we fill them up not just with a description, but we actually put pictures in sequence that show you this is what will happen when things are going well, this is how you compare it with what happens when things are going badly. And our idea is trying to alert people where to look in their browser, where to look on the screen, what things to look for, the kind of tricks that the crooks go for, what to do with emails, what not to do with emails, and so forth.
So, Rob Klein.
That was a shameless plug for nakedsecurity.sophos.com,
it
wasn't
was,
it?
but
Excellent.
It was great.
That's what I was hoping for.
So, Rob Klein is really shocked that no one has commented on your awesome T-shirt yet.
Well, it is an awesome T-shirt, and you too can own one just like it by going to shop.sophos.com, or let me be more formal, https://shop.sophos.com, and you can get T-shirts, cool socks, cool beanies. You can even buy high-end bicycles, but that's not why most people go there. Those are just a kind of, they were used by some Sophos people in a race that we participated in, an event that we participated in, and we figured you might like them. But the T-shirts, all of this, and many more other cool slogans, like malware is a dish best served never, for example, all there. I think they're about $9 or something like that, delivery
I don't know,
included.
check it. Go to the URL and check it out. So Rob's actually asked a question as well. He says, are there times that HTTPS isn't really doing the job? And are there ways to know?
Oh, that is a very open question. And there usually, when you're faced with HTTPS, web certificate trickery, what usually happens, you may see it, for example, if you go into a coffee shop and they've got free Wi-Fi, and what they do is they let you connect to their network, and there's no password on the network, but the first time you try and go anywhere, they basically redirect you to a fake site. And the fake site is their login, their captive portal, and their captive portal says, hey, you can't go to Bing.com search engine yet, you have to fill in this form. And of course, to do that, they have to pretend that they're Bing.com for one web page, and they can't put the right certificate up. You'll get a certificate warning. So they claim to be Bing.com, but they don't have the right certificate signed in the right way. So often when you go to a site that's presenting a bogus web certificate, it's pretty obvious, because no so-called certificate authority, the people who issue web certificates, will let just anybody have a website for, say, Microsoft.com or Sophos.com or Bing.com or whatever it is. So one protection is, if you get a warning that says there's something wrong with a web certificate, a couple of years ago, loads of people would let their certificates expire, or they put the wrong name in because it was all too hard, and we got in the habit of going, oh, certificate warning, who cares, it's only a website, and you'd click through, And if you're unlucky, your browser would remember that, so next time the crooks have got you, you won't get the warning again. So if you get a web security certificate warning, do not ignore it. They are there for a purpose. The other trick, obviously this is much harder to deal with, what happens if a certificate authority, somebody who signs web certificates, goes rogue, and they agree to sign a certificate for the wrong person. It's very difficult to deal with that, but usually it's reasonably infrequent, and when it happens, it's all over the news, so keep your eyes open and watch out for web certificate authorities that can no longer be trusted.
Okay, that's great. And then one final very quick question for you, Doug. What should Mac and iPhone users do now?
Well, get the update. Apple have traditionally been very good at getting updates out fast, and people tend to accept them. And since I'm in a hurry because I know we're over time, I've now botched things up on my phone. What do they say? More haste, less speed? Or,
well, while you look at that, I'm going to tell you that Andy says his wife stole his Sophos socks. They are in high demand, Andy.
That doesn't count as stealing, does it? If your missus wears your clothes, that's just, you just have to go with that. Yep. Okay. So what do you do on a Mac? Click on the Apple icon and go About Mac Software Update and wait to see if there's anything. Make sure that you probably get them automatically, but it's worth having a check. And if you aren't on the list yet, because Apple stagger the updates, you can jump the queue by saying I want to update now. Same on an iPhone or an iPad, you go to, Settings, General, Software Update, and after the updates, you'll see something like that. So you see there Safari 12, that's got the bug fix for this, and iOS 12 for the iPhone. That update includes a brand new version of Safari with this bug fix. And while you're about it, you're getting loads of other security updates and feature updates too, so you might as well do it because the crooks now know what bugs existed in iOS 11 and Safari 11 before the update was out. So don't be the low-hanging fruit. Get out there and get those updates.
That's great. Well, thank you, Duck, as always, for your wisdom, and thanks everyone for commenting and your questions.
Yes,
and
thanks,
if
everybody.
you have any more questions for Duck or the team, pop them in the comments box below, and we always check after the video has finished. And until next time, stay secure.
Bye.